Are you looking for the magic to make your life truly count? Do you want the secret formula to make every day your best day yet? Hello, and welcome to the Finishing on Fire radio show. And now, here are your show hosts, Dave Wadsworth and Greg Vance.
We are talking about our relationships with our children. And most people out there, they do have children, and they're blessed, or they have maybe siblings that have children that they deal with. But either way, I think we can learn a lot from our children, but we want to talk about our just that relationship and how special it is and how important it is in our lives. And just pretty neat subject, I think. It really makes our lives worthwhile when we interact with our children and learn and grow together. And we're talking about our book, Finishing on Fire, on Amazon, #1 bestseller, Finishing on Fire. And the subtitle is Live Your Legacy of Purpose, Passion, and Prosperity. And we're going to talk about children. And in the book here on page 141, we talk about targeting. And I want to mention that because when I talk about targeting, I talk about focusing in on the people that really matter in life. Okay. And I have a picture of a target, an actual, just a circular target with rings and so forth. Mm-hmm. And in the core of that target, the bullseye, okay, the bullseye of the target should be your spouse, obviously, your parents, if your parents are still alive, and then your children. And those are bullseye people in your life, your spouse, parents, and your children, because they are the ones that are the core of your life. And of course, next episode, we'll be talking about our siblings as a next ring out, and then also our friends in the third ring or second ring out. So anyway, but yeah, there you are. Perfect. Bullseye. Our children are bullseye. So
yeah, I love that. That's perfect because, you think about the ways in which, so we mentioned our parents, we mentioned our spouse, we mentioned our children, and the way that we want to influence one another in such a positive way, whether it's our parents on us, our spouse on us, or us on our children. Sometimes our children influence us in positive ways too, right?
That is true. That is true. Glenda and I were just laughing yesterday about we had lunch with our granddaughter. We took her out since she's only 4 or going to be 4. She couldn't take us, so we took her out for lunch, and she said something really funny. Oh, here's what it is. It's she has these little sayings, and they're funny. And we were playing with her in the backyard one day. She said, Gigi and Papa, let's take a shady break. And so she'd go over in the shade and sit down, and she wanted a shady break. And I'd never heard that before, a shady break. I thought, that's pretty cool. It's a good idea. She thinks like I do, get in the shade where it's cooler. But yesterday, her parents, some children are this way. And Greg, as we talk, you may have, kids that are this way, if you remember, but they don't want to change abruptly. They want, if they're in the middle of something, they want a little bit of a heads up that, hey, it's going to be time to leave. You got another 5 minutes to finish playing or finish up, and then we're gonna have to leave, or we're gonna have supper or whatever. Just a little bit of warning. And so, Brooke and Adam, what they would do, they'd say, "Okay, Harper, we're gonna set the timer. We've got 10 minutes, and you can play for 10 more minutes, and then we're gonna have to go." Okay. So yesterday, Glenda and I, we had lunch, and then they had this little playground there at this Mexican restaurant. So we went out to the playground, and Harper's playing, just having a good time. She's meeting new little friends there, and it's great. And Glenda says, "Now, Harper, we're going to set the timer, and because we're going to have to leave here in a little bit." And Harper runs over and she says, "Well, something about set it for a lot of minutes." It wasn't specific, it was a lot of minutes. So anyway, she knew that she wanted to keep on playing.
Exactly. Yeah, we're a little bit similar with that. My wife Sherry has reminded me that even though when my daughter sets the timer for our granddaughter, and it could be 2 minutes, 20 minutes, or 2 hours, if she's in the smack in the middle of doing something that she's focused on, that with her personality, you kind of got to let her just get that little next bit done, and then she's fine. But if you
Yeah.
tear her away in the middle of it, oh, what a battle.
Oh my gosh, that's fun. You know, and we're all different. We're all kind of unique.
Yeah,
And as we raise children, of course, you have a daughter and a son. Is that right?
that's correct. Yeah,
Okay. So and of course, daughters and sons are different, but even multiple daughters or multiple sons, everybody's different. And
exactly.
and so their personalities, just their interests, everything. And it's funny. Adam, our son, he always liked to be, he liked playing games or reading books and stuff like that. Where Sarah, our daughter, she was pretty adventuresome. She's more like me. She wanted to be outdoors, running around in the woods or playing around the lake, catching fish or frogs or turtles, and that was her thing. And it was kind of funny how each child is different. And so you need to work with that and have that flexibility, with them, because they have different levels of interest or patience or whatever it might be. So
Yeah, that is a tough one. We as parents, especially if you're, if you're the mom or the dad and you're home with 2 or 3 or however many kids you've got, and you're trying to get them all herded in the same direction, you tend to treat them all the same way, and we lose really quickly that they're individuals and they don't respond the same way to the same messages, just as you wouldn't or I wouldn't, to the same message probably.
yeah, you're exactly right. And as parents, we always want the best for our children.
Yes.
And so we need to really focus and pay attention to what is the best for each one. And I just think that's so important that we get so distracted that we sometimes we just need to step back and say, wait a minute, with this daughter or with this son, what is the best for them in this situation? How do we treat them? And I'm not saying favoritism, or I'm not saying you love one more than the other. They're just different. And so I think we need to look at them differently and just help them grow and develop, within their zone of genius, so to speak.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think you've got another quote from the book too that you wanted to cover, right?
Yes, I do.
102.
Okay, let me find this. Okay, page 102, and this is talking about. This is a quote I come up with years ago. Now, I may have heard it from somebody or one of the books I read. I don't know, but I believe it's from me. So when I wrote it in the book here, I wrote it, as a quote for me. But anyway, the quote is, "Too much of a good thing is a bad thing. Too little of a good thing is a bad thing." And I give the example here, like too much much salt will make you immediately gag and vomit. You just too much salt on a certain dish, or too little or no salt will leave life bland and unnecessarily weak. And I think that's the lesson we're trying to teach our children.
Right.
Balance and moderation and working within some limits. That you don't want too much of a certain thing or a good thing. Even though it's good, you can get too much of it.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, we talked about a couple of principles before we got on here and recording, and we went to our twin Andys for some wisdom. You pulled out an Andy Andrews and I pulled out an Andy Stanley. You want to go first with yours?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Andy Andrews, of course, he's one of my favorite authors, and I just love him and his value system. And one thing I've heard him quote over and over again, he says, "We are not raising children, we are raising independent adults." And I really like that because, we talk about, we focus in on the kids and, they're learning and so forth, but we got to remember the end game. Okay. What is it that we want, when we have raised these children? Well, we want them to be independent, fully functioning, happy adults. And that's really what our goal is. And so I think every day, even though we don't think about them being adults, I think we need, as we teach them lessons and interact with them, we have that in mind that, hey, this is something that will help them, step by step become a very happy, healthy, and wise adult. And really that's what we're raising. I love that about Andy Andrews. He's always such a forward thinker and a very grounded thinker. And so that's why I really like this quote and what he's talking about here.
Yeah, I do too. That really helps you to, as they say, Stephen Covey would say, begin with the end in mind. And so that's really, you're not trying to get a 8th grader or a 12th grader, maybe along the way, but ultimately you're trying to get this independent adult. So I think that's a really good reminder.
Yeah. Good point. So you've got another Andy you want to quote, Greg? Who's your Andy? Tell us about him.
My Andy is Andy Stanley. Very, very wise pastor. Read a lot of his books, and this is a principle that I don't suppose Andy's listening, but if he is, he would probably say that I'm going to butcher it up a little bit. But it's from it's a principle I heard him talk about in a podcast. Oh my gosh, so many years ago, probably 15 years ago or so, and I wish that I had learned this when my children were younger, but I think I learned it in time to maybe help. But anyway, he talks about a principle of parenting and visualizing it as a rope, which you think about that and you go like, what's that mean? But the way to envision it is you've got to, as we were just talking, and it relates to what you were using in your quote there, is that you've got to know each individual child specifically, what they need, what their personality, their talents, their skills, their decision making, all that. And so what he says is you have to know how quickly or how slowly to let out the rope for each child. So if you let it out too fast and they're not ready for it, you could have some mishaps, some disasters. If you don't let it out fast enough and they're eager to move forward and you're just pulling them in, holding them back, that can be equally as damaging as well to them. So you've got to really be testing and thinking and really considering your child and how quickly you let them gain responsibility, what kind of decisions they're able to wrestle with and to make, and just how much wisdom they have. And of course, along the way, hopefully you're teaching them, providing them information to get them ready for the next stage where you can let some more rope out. And so just one of those visual things that once I heard it, it was like, wow, that really stuck with me all these years.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'd never really heard that from him or anybody really. And I like that because we just so many times, and that's a part of focusing on the individual child and that being an everyday thing. It's something that we need to focus and say, okay, in this particular instance, how much rope do I give them? Do I give them enough? We used to talk about give them enough rope to hang themselves. Well, we don't want to do that, but we want to give them enough rope that maybe they skin their knees and they learn a lesson,
right?
And remember that lesson, or but if you don't give them enough rope, it's like riding the bike. At some point, I don't know if you remember, but they had the training wheels on their bike, and then we took off the training wheels and we'd hold on to the seat and hold them upright, and then they would wobble and wiggle and go. And at some point, you got to let go of the seat, and you got to let them go, and they're going to have to do their thing, and they're going to crash and burn, but
Right.
you just have to know when to let go of that seat. And that rope is a great analogy. I really, really like that. I think that's a very, very wise thing to think about and use, implement with your children.
Exactly. So I know we were going to talk a little bit about kind of what it takes from a commitment perspective to, to raise a child up and such. And I know you had a couple things you wanted to talk about in regard to lessons.
Yeah, I think the lessons, there's so many different lessons. I know one, and I had it here on my notes here. This was from Jim Rome. We talked about an apple a day.
Yep.
An apple a day is a good thing. Okay. If you remember, they say an apple a day helps keep the doctor away. And that's where our lessons are every day, every day, every day. And Jim Rohn talks about, an apple a day is fine. But if you forget, to eat the apple and say you go 9 days, you don't turn around and say, "Oh my, I forgot, to eat my apple a day," and then you eat 9 apples on one day in one day. It's like, no. It doesn't work that way. You're going to get a bad tummy ache and some other problems. And that's the way with our children. We need to every day look for opportunities to teach them and to help them learn and grow, and not and feed them an apple a day, what's healthy for them every day. And don't wait a week or 2 weeks and then all of a sudden just blast them with 9 or 10 lessons that they need to learn. Yeah, you just don't want to do that, because it's not healthy for them mentally, physically, emotionally. You're going to mess them up, and they're just not going to get it. But every day, just look for those opportunities to share with them, and stop and say, "Hey, now wait a minute, here's the lesson in this," and be creative about it, how you help them learn, and always do it in love, always do it with respect and kindness. And sometimes you need to be very firm, but always show that love and respect and kindness, and let them know that, this is the way, these rules are set in place for your good. And I always love you no matter what, and just do it that way. But it needs to be a daily thing. It can't be something that you save up and then, eat 9 apples in one day. That is going to be a problem. I guarantee it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, in that, a lot of times, and everybody has parented differently over the last, 20, 30, 40, I don't know how many years people may be listening to our podcast, our listener here today. But, one of the things that I think we universally, my wife and I, continue to come back to is kids really respond well to boundaries and to clear expectations. And if you can make those things very clear, communicate well, it can really help give a child a sense of really how they're measuring up. Not that it's all performance and all that, but there's certain boundaries that can be really helpful. And I think the other thing we were going to talk about here briefly was that related to that is your kids are always watching you.
Yeah.
And it's what you do, not what you say. And so I think as parents, and you've probably done this as well, I can think back and think about, well, maybe I sent some conflicting messages once in a while.
Yeah.
So,
I think about my kids, and I told Adam this here a while back. I told him, I said, you know what? I said, you need to be careful, because obviously, your daughter is watching everything you do. And no matter what you say, she's really watching you. And so I told him, I said, don't ever do anything that you wouldn't want your daughter to do. And just pretend that she's watching you all the time, because if you're near her, she is watching you, and she's picking up those habits and what you say. I remember the joke. This is kind of a bad joke. Not bad, but it's the guy that he was just bragging and saying, you know what? He says, I don't drink and I don't smoke and I don't cuss. And and something happened. And he turned around. He says, and he goes blankety blank. He says some bad word. He says, I just left my cigarettes at the bar. Like, okay, wait a minute. Didn't you just say you don't drink, smoke, and cuss?
Yeah.
But our children are watching what we're doing, not what we're saying.
Right.
You know, our words, yeah, they're important. They're very important. But let me tell you, your actions really speak louder than your words. And
Right.
be careful that that you're sending out the right message, and that you're teaching them every day, you know, how to act and how to respond in certain situations.
Right.
You know, you talk about traffic, you know, I'm gonna get in trouble on this one. Maybe my wife won't listen, but yesterday we were driving Harper home from the from lunch, and we were headed back to their houses, only maybe half a mile. and Glenda, she pulls up at the stoplight, and then she needs to get in the other lane, but she thinks, okay, well, I'll just go ahead through the stoplight when we take off, and I'll speed up a little bit and I'll get over, you know, and then I can turn up here, you know. And and she went across the intersection, and then she's going to you know, a little bit, and somebody in front of her kind of turned funny, so she kind of darted over to the other lane, and I said, whoa. And Harper in the back seat, she says, Gigi, I think you need to slow down a little bit. I'm like, and she was back there. She was watching this little goofy movie thing on the phone. It was funny. And then all of a sudden she just says that. And it's like,
Pops
whoa.
up.
She's already telling Gigi that she needs to slow down. That was so funny, because you think they're not watching you, but my goodness, they they
Exactly.
are. Oh my
Oh
gosh.
my gosh.
Hilarious. So
Well, so I know you're a excellent student of history, and you're going to share us a little thing about George Washington Carver with us.
yeah. Well, Greg, you know, it goes back actually to Andy Andrews
Mhm.
and all his books, and he has so many good historical references and stories about people. And one of the things that he has in his story, in his different books, he talks about the life of George Washington Carver,
Mhm.
who is just an amazing, amazing man who lived here in America, and who really had a huge influence. And you talk about relationship between parents and children. What he did, that his very survival was based on his basically adopted parents, really. Moses and Susan Carver, actually, they were in Missouri, a little area called Diamond, Missouri, and they not too far from Joplin area. And
Okay.
they, what had happened, they were in a slave state at the time, and it was during the Civil War and all this. And what had happened, they didn't believe in slavery, but they had bought Mary Carver, Mary Washington, you know, and had her and her two boys as slaves to protect them. And they just treated them like family. They had a little cabin there, right there on their place, on their farm and stuff and everything. And they were best friends, and they really were. But there was a group of what they called the Quantrill's Raiders, who would come through and burn barns and burn houses and torture people. And they would take the slaves, or you know, any of the slaves, and they would try to, and they were mean, and they would rob and loot and do all kinds of stuff. And one night they came through, and they took Mary Washington and little George, and he was just a baby. And Moses Carver and Susan, they sent out immediately and found where they could meet up and recover and get and barter and get George back. But Mary had been killed. Apparently she was gone, but they used their last horse on the farm to ransom and get little baby George back.
Mhm.
And the story is that he was in just a burlap bag, middle of the night. It was freezing cold, and they just threw him over to George, or to Moses Carver. and he took the little baby out, and he was nearly dead. He was frozen and just sickly, and he put him inside his shirt and inside his coat, up against his skin, and he walked for hours back home to get him home, and then they nursed him back to health, and he survived, which is a miracle. But that little George grew up to be what they called a plant doctor. He was so interested in plants. Mm-hmm. And actually, Andy Andrews talks about him really being responsible for the saving the lives of nearly 2 billion people on the planet.
Wow.
And in a roundabout way, that's what really happened. It's just an amazing story, but it all started with the love of parents. And these were adopted parents, because his mother was killed and he was actually a slave baby, technically, in the world. But they took him and they raised him and they treated him as their own. And if they hadn't have done that, the ripple effect would have been huge. And so it's amazing what impact we have on our children and what impact they will have on the world. And we have no idea. But I don't know if we have time for the story for me to go into how that all came about or not. Do we have a little bit of time, Greg?
Yeah, go ahead, do it.
There's some hesitation there. He's thinking, oh my gosh, he's going to get wound up. What happened? Andy Andrews talks about the story of, he was listening to the news. He was in a hotel room one day and the news came on, big broadcast, and they have the person of the week. And they mentioned the person of the week this week is Norman Borlaug. And this was back in 2004. And Andy's like, wow, I didn't even know he was still alive. But I'm like, who is this guy? Well, he actually was a agronomy and agriculture scientist who would breed corn and wheat. And he was in charge of a experiment station down in Mexico that was put in place to breed hybrid corn and hybrid wheat for arid climates. And so it could grow and thrive in very, very arid climates, like, desert areas and so forth. And through that, it was spread over the world, and from Africa to Asia to Siberia, everywhere. And through his hybrid wheat and corn, it actually fed and saved nearly 2 billion people, is what they credited him with. And I believe he won a Nobel Peace Prize actually for what he had done.
Wow.
But he had done the work, but the reason he was in place was because of a man named Henry Wallace. And Henry Wallace had been the Secretary of Agriculture for the United States, and then he became vice president under Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And so he had served under him for one term, but while he was there, he was the one that authorized and set up the experiment station in Mexico for Norman Borlaug to run and do the work. So Henry Wallace was the key man to get that going. And so they give him credit for saving the 2 billion people. But then the story goes back and it's like, well, was it really Henry Wallace that saved the 2 billion people? And the story goes that when Henry Wallace was a little boy, a student there at Iowa State University, had a dairy sciences professor, and his young boy was Henry Wallace. And George Washington Carver was that student, and he would take little Henry Wallace out on Saturday mornings, and they would go on these botanical expeditions where they would collect plants and different species and specimens, and they would study them. And he taught little Henry the value of plants and all the uses they could have and how important they were for mankind. And because of that, those early lessons, and little Henry, he learned the value of that. And then when he was in power, he continued that on and started this experiment station and all this. And so then you look back to George Washington Carver as the one who actually probably should get credit, for saving 2 billion people. And the story goes back even to his parents, Susan and Moses Carver, who actually saved that little baby, and how close he was to death.
Wow.
And if he had died, okay, that chain would have been broken, and what would have happened. And so it goes all back to parents and children teaching lessons and learning and growing and making the best of every day, which I talk about so much in my book, Finishing on Fire. Every day, make it your best day. And whoever you're interacting with, whether it's your children or your grandchildren, but the lessons you're teaching them, it's so critical. And this is just a story that I like to tell, because it talks about that ripple effect of what you do today and each day, and how important that can be. You have no idea. You really don't. So I love that story. So
Yeah, I love that story. I've heard parts of that before, but you did a really good job of tying them all together. And I love the way that Andy Andrews researches those and figures out some of those pivotal points where things, could have gone in a completely different direction, and things could have taken years, decades, centuries to happen. So yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, I appreciate you being patient and letting me tell about it.
Well, I'm going to put you back on the spot now, because if you're the person listening today, if you're a regular listener, we're going to switch over to Wadsy's world. And that's where Dave has this miraculous ability to have a myriad of encounters with animal life, and to live to tell about some of the both amazing and ridiculous stories that he has.
And now it's time for Wadsy's World. Yes, Dave Wadsworth's true life animal stories.
So, but we're going to pick a number, and today's number is 39, and he's going to go over to his magic list and tell us what that is.
Oh, I keep forgetting. I don't know the number. Okay, 39 is pigeons. Okay, so I've got to tell
pigeons. What could a pigeon do?
Yeah, a pigeon story. I've got different pigeon stories. Probably one of my favorites is you're gonna love this one. Years ago, we took a family trip when our kids were probably Adam was probably 12, Sarah was probably 9, I guess, somewhere in there. And we got a chance. We had a lady at church who was a good friend of ours, travel agent, and we set up a trip and went to Hawaii. And it was over Thanksgiving. It was neat. And we one of the things we did, we were not well off, so we got us bus passes, so we could get on a bus, the metro, and we could go sightseeing. And we pay, I don't know what it was like $2 a day per person. It was really cheap. And so we had the bus schedule and all that, and it would take you, we went out to Diamond Head, and we went to went to Pearl Harbor, just different places all around the island. It was great. It was awesome. Well, one morning we were going down to get on the bus, and we were standing there out in front of the hotel, and all of a sudden I felt something, and it kind of went down my back, and it was a weird sensation. It was really a weird sensation. Well, one thing about Hawaii, they have lots of pigeons. I don't know where they come from, but they're up in these big palm trees. And I said, Glenda, I believe this pigeon just nailed me in the back. And she's like, uh-oh. So I turn around, and we're sitting there waiting on the bus, and it's going to be here any minute now. So I turn around, and she's like, oh, Dave, it was like that pigeon had been waiting for a week just to bomb me, because it was bad. It was massive. And she's like, oh my gosh, there's no way we can clean this off. She says, you got to put on a new shirt, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, the bus will be here in a minute. Of course, then I'm thinking, I don't want to wear around, pigeon poop all day,
Right.
So,
yeah.
So I had to run upstairs, get a new shirt, change real quick, and run back down there. And we caught the bus. We were very lucky to do that. But that pigeon, oh my gosh, that dude, you'd have thought he had just planned this whole bomb sequence, and it went right down my back, and it kind of hit just around my shoulder blade, and it just kind of at the right angle, and it just whoop all the way down the back. So
oh my gosh,
needless to say, That was not a happy pigeon encounter. There's no fun there.
And you and pigeons are so common, they're everywhere, especially in cities, but you had to go all the way to amazing Hawaii to have that encounter. That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. You talk about getting dumped on.
Oh
That
my
was ugly. I
gosh.
thought, oh my gosh.
Uh,
Yeah.
well, thanks for sharing
That
that
was
with
that's
us.
what
Yeah, yeah. So I know one of the things we wanted to talk about in our last lap learning today.
And now it's time for Last Lap Learning.
And by the way, Andy Andrews, we should have you sponsor our episodes. But I know you had a resource to share that I wasn't familiar with. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I haven't actually got this resource. I've heard him talk about it many times, and I have a little bit of knowledge about it, but it's really cool. It's actually I think it's a series of videos actually, and it's called the 100-Year Parenting Online Course. They got the online course, and I think you can actually buy the DVDs of it and stuff. And it talks about raising children, and again, it talks about raising independent, good, solid adults, and you're not just raising kids. And it talks about 100-year parenting. Well, the effects of what you're doing with your children, the interactions every day, every year of their life is cumulative, and it will build up and it will last. And that ripple effect will continue for decades and decades and decades. And so it's critical that you do, you teach the lessons, and you provide the insights and the wisdom that will be a foundation, a great solid foundation of good values for these young people in your life to be solid, productive, happy, independent adults. And I think that's what this whole 100-Year Parenting program he's got is about. And I would strongly encourage you to check into it if you're raising children now. And I've heard about it several times, but yeah, I think it'd be a great resource for people.
Yeah, we got on it. You and I got on there and looked at that before we got on on our recording here today. And so, yeah, it looks pretty interesting. I wished I'd had known about it earlier and made use of it. But I think it's definitely, like you said, we can't endorse it because we haven't personally been through it, but it looks like it's worthy of checking out for sure.
Oh yeah. Everything I've seen of Andy, all the books I've read of his, met him personally. He did compliment me on my first book. I was so pleased when I gave him a copy of my first book, and Living in the Ditch, and he looked at the cover of that. There's a big line of us waiting to and get a picture with him and stuff. And he read that, Living in the Ditch, and then he read the subtitle, which was One Ditch, Two Boys, 3,000 Adventures. And he looked at that and he says, that is really a great subtitle. Yeah. He says, I like that, and I thought, my gosh, this guy is a world-renowned author. And he says that about my book. I thought, he is either the nicest guy in the world, or he's, or he's just, I don't know, blowing smoke at me. But he was very sincere. And I thought that is really awesome. He's a guy that I think they said one time, one of his books is sold every minute of every day throughout the world, all over the world. Wow. There's a book sold of his every minute. And I'm thinking, well, good for him. So
I don't doubt that. He probably read that subtitle and probably said, that sounds like something that he would have written.
yeah, right. Yeah, that's funny. Matter of fact, he has the what is it called? The Department of Veterans Affairs, who I think that's who it is. They have requested 10,000 books. They want him to donate 10,000 of his books, the Traveler's Gift, to the veterans. I can't remember the name of the title of the
Veterans Administration, the VA.
VA, that's what I guess it's Veterans Administration. That's who it is. And so I've been listening to him here, and he's been promoting that. And you can actually buy and donate, some of his books, to, it's like $10 a piece. You can donate one of his books to the Veterans Administration for veterans and their families. And that's a really cool thing. He's such a generous person, really is just a a neat guy. And yeah, any way you can help in that, that's a great thing, because he is always looking to give. He just wants to help people. So you can tell it.
Yeah, you're right. I've definitely seen where he'll make materials and workbooks free to schools that
Yep.
want to use his books in their curriculum. And I think we used to be able to, you and I could get on and download some of those materials as well. So good stuff.
Yeah. 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 He has given away so much to schools. I don't know if it's junior high and high school. I don't know if it's elementary too or not, but yeah, he is extremely generous with his materials and some of his different lessons that he's got. And of course he's written, some children's books,
Right.
all these lessons and stuff, not just for adults. So yeah, that's really cool. So.
Okay, so we were also going to, before we got on recording today, we talked about for our manly movies moments segment, we talked about some movies, and I think with the winner we're going to talk about is actually one of yours.
And now it's time for manly movie moments.
I've heard of this movie, and I think I've seen part of it, but I've never seen the whole thing. So tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, you've got to watch this. It's funny. And of course, I've always been a Steve Martin fan. He's just goofy and funny, and that's kind of the way I am too. So, but he started a movie with Bonnie Hunt, and it's called Cheaper by the Dozen, and it is hilarious. And they actually he's like a small town college football coach, very successful, and he gets a chance to go back to his alma mater and be the coach at a big time program for a while. And they have 12 children. And
Wow.
so they call it, cheaper by the dozen. And they have, do they have a couple sets of twins? I think they do. And they have just all kinds of, and it's quite a family. And the interaction between the children, the parents, and each of them, like we said, totally different.
Right.
And it's just really funny, but they treat them all differently. You can see how they all interact differently because they just have different personalities, different interests, and it's just really a fun movie. And I just, you need to watch it. It's really pretty neat. But he finds out that, when he goes to this big time college program, his alma mater, he does okay, but it really messes up the family and the family dynamic, and it just changes everything. And so he's like, no, the family's more important, because his wife in this, Bonnie Hunt, she's really good in this movie. She starts, she has a book she wrote, and she's going on the book tour. They call her up and she goes around to these different shows, Today Show and all that, Good Morning America, whatever. And then they're supposed to have a deal where Oprah comes over and interviews her at their home. And when they've got it set up for Oprah to show up, it's chaos. And the kids have just, it just is at the tipping point when everything just explodes. And Oprah's people are there setting up, and they're like, no, you cannot come over, you stay, this is a mess, and it's not, this is not a big happy family. It's about to explode, and it's awful, but it's hilarious. And Steve Martin is hilarious. He does a great job, and just a lot of neat, good family friendly humor, but it's a good story about families and your children and the parents and loving each one and loving them for who they are. Mm-hmm. And I just was really and how they come together as a family, no matter what, they seem to work things out because they're going in so many directions. But it's a good movie. So Cheaper by the Dozen, Steve Martin and Bonnie Hunt and bunch of kids. Hillary Duff was one of the girls in there. She was funny. They were just really, really good stuff. So yeah.
So, sounds like a good one. I have to check that out. I think I've seen, for some reason, I've seen pieces of it, but never the whole thing. So I'll check that out.
Yeah. You need to do that. So.
All right. Well, you ready to take us out, Dave, with your 2-minute warning?
And now it's time for the 2-minute warning.
I think we got a good one today.
Yeah. Take us out. I like the word. That sounds bad, doesn't it? Okay. Um, here's what we want to do today. When you're listening to this, this is your takeaway. This is what I want you to do. This is an immediate call to action and what we want you to do. Reach out to your sons and daughters and give them a word of encouragement. Tell them that you love them, that you're proud of them, no matter where they're at or what they've done. Reach out to them today. Just do it today and say, hey, I love you. I'm proud of you. I'm always on your side, no matter where they're at in life or what they've done. Just let them know that. And whether they've been, had a rough time or they're doing great, everybody needs to hear that, especially your children. Do that. Don't ever hesitate to say the kind of encouraging words, but that's your 2-minute warning. Do it right now. Tell them you love them. Tell them you're proud of them. Encourage them, and just let them know what you think of them. All right. So that's our
All right.
warning.
All right. Good show. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Finishing on Fire radio show. Be sure to visit finishingonfire.com for more great content. Go light your world.